Hi everyone, I'm Gordon Burkell at Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. Every Friday, we interview a professional to discuss their craft and how they like to approach things. Today, I'm joined with Matt Tomlinson, who's a color scientist, and he's worked on Black Panther, Okja, The Irishman, and so much more. Hi Matt, welcome to the show.
Fantastic to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. I guess can you, because not many people would know, can you take me through what a color scientist does for a
It's
film?
a great question. It's actually a kind of a hard question to kind of sum
I'm,
up in
I'm
in
starting
in
with
a
my
couple
hardball
sentences.
questions.
Yeah, no, it's a the there's a couple different avenues to kind of answer that question. That really one of them is to make sure that what you see on the screen, the image that you see on the screen, is how it's expected to be seen. A real kind of basic concept there is like when you go to a movie theater, you see a movie, and then then you see the same movie on, say, Blu-ray. You expect that same movie to look the same. Um, the technologies, the color spaces between the movie theater and your Blu-ray television are different. And if we don't map those accordingly, then they would look wildly different from one another. I help create the Rosetta Stones that map one color space to another color space, so that whatever movie you're looking at on whatever device you're looking at it on, the goal is to maintain creative intent. So that's kind of the technical side of it. The more, kind of a creative side of it is I help create the looks that would be used for the show. So like a director of photography or a director would come in, and I'd work with the colorist before the movie starts, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm making this movie, and I want my movie I want it to look like this. I want it to look like the referencing other movies, like um, they want it to look like the Godfather, or I want it to look like a painting from post, the Renoir, if you will. I want that color palette. So they'll oftentimes bring in books with pictures, or hey, could you watch this other movie? Or I like this specific moment in this other movie, or check out the skin tones of this painting. Those kind of things. Like a great example of that would be on The Irishman, where there were distinct looks that were created for different time periods of the movie, and I helped create those looks with the on the technical end with the director of photography and the colorist. And so, like, one decade was Kodachrome, one decade was Ektachrome, one decade was bleach bypass, and the goal there from a thematic standpoint was to kind of take the viewer through the journey of time by hooking them in with the type of film stock that would be used during that day.
Now, not to get too much into the weeds, but you mentioned about making sure that the film looks, how it should in the theater, also on your Blu-ray, on your, iPhone, I guess, if someone wants to watch it there.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that's tricky is that just the way, and I think you even kind of mentioned this, just the way, if I have a Panasonic television, it's going to interpret or handle colors differently from the way, a properly calibrated colorist monitor would. So how do you go about making sure that you can get at least close enough on a mediocre television?
Well, what you have to do is you have to go by the standards. So at some point you have to plant your flag in the ground and say everybody needs to go to this standard. And really, the television manufacturers and everyone are everyone's supposed to work in this certain way of like, hey, to abide by the rules, everything's being shown in this certain color space, which televisions more and more nowadays are actually getting getting closer to that. Like there's the movie maker initiative that just came out on televisions, where you've got the Martin Scorseses of the world who are buying in on this, and it's a certain type of calibration. Other televisions that have come out in the most recent days, they'll have actually settings that are are set to spec. So you could set them to the spec of like Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, and know that, you know, they're built in such a way that they're handling the actual you know, standard that we're all kind of striving for. Now, again, I would, you know, on televisions that you buy, there's most likely going to be like a standard mode, a vivid mode, a game mode, those kind of things. And you know, that's where you get into the Best Buy experience, where like the idea is, when you're showcasing your television to purchase, you want it to pop more. There's a concept where cooler highlights, bluer white highlights will associate itself with being cleaner, a cleaner highlight, a cleaner white. So hence televisions in like showrooms will oftentimes be set to a white point of like 9300, which is a very blue white, as opposed to like a standard 6500, which is where our target is. And that's to catch your eye, and hopefully we'd, you know, pull the buyer to get that television and purchase it. But even when you bring it home, more and more nowadays, even if you don't have those standardized Rec 709 settings within it, even if it just says the standard mode, is more and more becoming it's driving itself towards the recommendations and standardizations of you know, what we should be going for in an SDR world. HDR world has its own standards, which are being actually represented, I think, a little more concretely, which is a good thing. People kind of grabbed onto it very early and said, let's try to standardize in a really good way, mainly because they're trying to, you know, show this amazing new technology that's out there. But, you know, my recommendation is, on your television, if you're watching regular television, set it to standard mode. Don't put it on vivid or game mode, and that will bring you to a closer sense of what the filmmaker was intending.
Now, I heard about movie maker mode, you know, for the Martin Scorseses of the world, as you said. I didn't realize, is it already making its way into televisions now?
It's starting to. Like I saw CES.
Yeah.
I showed a couple TVs. I have yet to see one on market personally myself, but just more and more I'm hearing that it's getting traction. So like I've seen televisions that, you know, like the LGs have like the Technicolor setting, and that I found is pretty good. And there's, you know, the Panasonics actually have. You can actually set it to the color spaces that you're going for and the gammas that you're going for, and you can get into those submenus in these kind of like, you know, prosumer, if you will, displays that are being sold at a really great price point. To be honest, like, you know, I would absolutely recommend some of these TVs for people who want to purchase one for a new one. You know, that there's a lot. The newer ones are coming out as SDR and HDR compliant. So if you have the ability to get HDR through like a Disney Plus or a Netflix or something like that, then it'll give you that experience, and that's kind of cool.
Now, you also mentioned earlier that you know, they might come in with art that they want you to imitate, or not imitate, but replicate, I guess you could say, the colors. So do you have to stay up on your artwork and keep it on track of all that? Like, have you got a lookbook for yourself of artists and artwork that you follow?
Well, you know, that's a bit of passion where, you know, I went to school I was a film major and a studio arts minor. So, you know, once upon a time, I wanted to make Saturday morning cartoons. So the concept of art to me is something that I'm into anyway. Now, if there's a certain type of art that I'm not familiar with, then absolutely I'll go in and research out what it is, and just really what I'm looking for is like what are the tones, what are the hues of this imagery that the creator is gravitating towards. Like, you know, are there strong primaries? Do they live more in the secondaries? Are the shadows more open, or is it more contrast? Is it film noir? or is it more or more where we see into the shadows? Generally bright, dark. Do we want to have a do we want to tint in a certain way? There's this concept of like, where do skin tones live? Like, do they shift more on the amber side, or do they shift more towards the pink side? And a lot of that can be influenced by the region of the world that you were raised in, your culture, and how you perceive, like, based on our cameras here of what we're saying, I'm looking at the screen here and I can see you and I can see me, and your skin tone's more olive based than mine. So, that could have to do with how much time we spend in the sun, and also our heritage. So based on that, you as a creator might have an idea of what healthy looking skin tone looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So we would need to understand that. And those paintings and those pictures, those are the starting points. And from that, I'll build lookup tables, if you will, transforms, if you will, that will take, hopefully, test imagery from the director of photography. So we're actually using their imagery. We're moving out of the theoretical realm, and we're getting more into the practical realm, where it's like, okay, let's get actors that look like our actors. Or get the actual actors, which would be amazing. Let's put them in the set. Let's put them in the costumes. Let's put swatches of color of where the different sets are going to be. So like, there'll be hopefully like great hair and makeup tests where, actors will be sitting in multiple lighting scenarios, day, night, interior, exterior. And you'll have, they'll be wearing different outfits at different times, and there'll be chip charts and different patches of color that they expect to have in this movie. And that's where you start seeing, this is, okay, I'm starting to feel this here, because the red that you see with your eye on set may not be the red that you're looking for creatively. That's not what that Renoir red will give you. So we want to have that more painterly look. I don't want electric greens. I don't want the grass fields. I don't want them to look like neon. I want them to look like forest, dark, rich, like the land is nurturing them. They're not radiated. So those are the kind of color palettes. And then when you start getting into that realm, that's where the real fun starts, because then the director of photography, or the colorist, or all of us in the same room, or even virtually as it is nowadays, because we're maybe looking at different displays at the same time, but we're all calibrated correctly and we can all interact, kind of like how you and I are interacting right now. So at that point, then people go, okay, we're here. We're kind of phase one, if you will. Now I like what I'm seeing on this portion of the image, but I don't like seeing what I see on this other portion. It's too contrast, or the reds are too much. It's too saturated over here. So can we shift this? And that's where it gets fun, because depending on time, maybe we can go back and do some adjustments and come back and have another session. Or maybe I or the colorist can go and just do some adjustments on the fly. And it becomes a real-time session, almost like an audio mixing session, if you will, where the colorist and I are working in tandem, where she or he has tools and controls at their fingertips, but I also have tools and controls, and I'm just right off on the side, and I'm building things that, maybe my tools are just a little bit more surgical. Maybe they just, fine tune in certain areas, and then I can say, here, colors, plop this into your settings, and let's just see how this little shift happens. Because sometimes what we're looking for are not great, huge maneuverings from where we originally were. We're getting into that fine-tuned minutia where you almost get, it almost becomes about a feeling where, like, I can't pinpoint what's going on that I don't like, but I feel it. And it's just, that's where it's small and it's subtle, and you play and you give offerings, and the moment people like it, that they go, aha, this is the moment. And the wonderful thing about digital is that once you have that moment, you can kind of lock it down. You can say, we've captured this. Now this is our playground. This is our color palette. This is where we will explore. And from there, since we can build this initial playground in a controlled environment, we can say, all right, well, maybe we looked at it projected. We can go, oh, okay, I know how to map this into Rec 709 for your phone. I know how to map this into HDR for theatrical or home HDR viewing. You know, we can take it in those directions. The whole goal there is once we have it in that controlled environment, wherever you go, you should be able to say, that's my movie.
Now, I have a lot of questions from that. But the first and probably the most important was you wanted to be an animator. What was your Saturday morning cartoon that you liked?
Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Ah, which was in the 90s, right? The one just after.
That was in the 80s. That was one with Firestar and Iceman.
Yeah. Okay.
That and Bugs and all the Bugs Bunny cartoons, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So now then my other question is, you talked about everyone sort of looking at things in real time because you all have calibrated monitors, but you also sort of touched on, you know, the way you see the red in the painting doesn't show the same on the screen. And it got me to thinking, what happens if, you know, because it happens a lot for me where I'll see a color and I see it slightly different from the way someone else has seen it, right? So let's say it's somewhere between blue and green. I might say, oh, it's a blue, and someone else might be saying it's more green. How do you deal with that level of or that type of issue with like a director or a cinematographer to make sure that you're both seeing the color the way they want? Because if they want the dress to look a particular red and you're putting this red up, it might not, from a communication standpoint, be working.
Well, that's part of my job, is to actually try to get inside the thought process of the creator. So if someone says that's blue green, but I may have associated originally with cyan, I need to understand that, no, that's blue green. I need to understand that, well, okay, when, like, here's a great example, like, what is red? I was with a partner, you know, a friend, a work colleague, I should say. We were down in Mexico City not too long ago on a show. And I was making the comment of kind of go back to the Animator Roots, where I believe, you know, primary colors can be associated with culture. Mm-hmm. And that's how I see it. Like, and a great example for me is red in USA is a primary red. I generally associate primary red with this country here as being kind of a bluish red, where down in Mexico, southern cultures, the red is a little more tilted to the orange side. And I'll use, you know, the great example for me was some of the cartoons. What is the Dora the Explorer? The reds in that show are an orange red, whereas you look at old Super Friends cartoons, the red in Superman's cape is more of a blue red. So there's that kind of like, okay, what is red? What does that mean? That I need to figure that out, and I need to go in that direction. Now, if two other people are having the same conversation with me, but they're saying, no, that's too green, and the other person saying, no, that's too blue, well, that's where you go, okay, let me give you some options. And that's where we can go on the fly and just take the image in certain directions and let it roll and let it fold. Because sometimes vocabulary is sometimes it's not as precise as we want it to be. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's more of the, let's just see it. We need to experience and we need to be part of it. And once we're there, once we get there, we know it. So, okay, you're not feeling this, you don't like this. Okay, let's go in this direction. Oh, you don't like that? Let's roll it back in here. Oh, now we're finding where we are. And then we can find ourselves in that happy place again.
Because you said you studied film and then you also did an understudy of art. How the heck do you become a color scientist? Like, I feel like there's no schools that are like, hey, we've got a film program, you can specialize in color science.
There are Rochester School of Design, Institute of Design in New York does have a program for that. I took a different route where I interned. I went to Loyola Marymount University film school, and I interned at many places during my tenure at college, and one of them was at a VFX studio at the time called Bossfilm, and yeah, so you know, I was there during like Air Force One and
Oh wow.
and those. So I interned in the department, which was the imaging department, and this was in the mid '90s. Now you have to think this was before Jurassic Park. This was actually the time of The Crow,
Okay.
where the where Brandon Lee's face was superimposed on another actor for just a scene to finish the movie, and that was a big deal. This was the time where I was, you know, like I worked on Outbreak and these Multiplicity. That was the first show that I ever worked on where visual effects were film captured, digitally scanned, computer manipulated, because 2 years before everything was analog. People were still doing matte paintings and things like that. Now we're in the digital world. People were creating VFX in the digital world. Then it was being mapped back out to film, and VFX was just cut and egg into the rest of the movie. So the idea of like DIs, where everything was digitized and kept in this digital realm, that was still 15 years away. I walked in, and you know, it was the film scanning and recording and being able to manipulate color, because what I was doing in the beginning was I was color correcting scanned background plates.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for like 7 years, and it was just kind of one of those things where like I walked into this room and it was like, I'm looking at the future, I know it, and I just want everything to do with it. So I just kind of made it my life's pursuit in that respect.
Okay. Now, what would you say was the most challenging scene you've ever had to work on, or project you've had to work on, and what made it so challenging?
Well, I mean, every show has its own challenges. The challenges, it's a different way to, there's different ways to define challenge. And I will, I'll use 3 examples.
All right.
And I'm going to say challenges in kind of like really kind of pushing myself in new directions and taking things in new ways. And one was I worked on the original Avengers movie. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the first digitally captured shows that I had really worked on, where everything was digital capture, and setting up the entire workflow for that show, and just the scale of that show, and the fact that, you know, 3D was still rather new, and at the time it was kind of still hot. You know, it was very hot at the time, and just walking that show, mapping the workflow, the image path of the entire workflow for that show was a great challenge, where like basically I had created a workflow chart that looked like the German subway system, where, you know, any part of where we were, I could say, okay, we're here in our chain of order of events. And that's that's a concept that I've just taken with me forever, of like, if we can map out our order of operations of where we are in the workflow of the show, that way we can always define where we are. And if somebody strays, if somebody goes, oh, I went in this direction, well, if you know where you're supposed to be and you know where you are, you can bring it back. You can re-guide the ship, if you will. So that was super cool. The other one, The Irishman, was a very technical challenge, because of setting up the different looks based on the different time frames of Kodachrome and Ektachrome and bleach bypass, and it was the integration of the film and that was captured both on film and digital, and helping try to make that as a seamless transition as possible, because they actually had different input transforms to make them blend with each other better. And then the third one would be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because that was really interesting, because we made a movie 2 years ago now, although the process took 2 years. So it over a 3-year span, we made a movie in a digital age, but it's set back in the time where film is king. But it's not just a period piece about movie making at that time. We made the movie as if it was made in that time. So it was all film. It was film cut. There was things were created digitally for things like DI and digital projection and home viewing and everything. But the whole goal was to have the digital look as true to an original struck print as possible, which 20 years ago was a workflow that was, that was a pretty, 25 years ago, that was a pretty standardized workflow. No, I'll take back 20 years ago. Today's day and age, there's a lot of infrastructure that existed then that just doesn't exist now. So it was a real challenge, and it was a great example of collaboration, and that was a lot of fun.
Now I have one last question for you, and I asked your colleague Glenn earlier. We're in this pandemic. At the moment, we've sort of got the light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine, but a lot of people are stuck at home. So what have you seen during the pandemic, movie-wise or television show-wise, on Netflix or Hulu or whatever, that you would recommend to people?
What have I seen that I would recommend to people? This is going to be funny, but I've just discovered the show Glee.
Okay.
Which has been a very lighthearted experience for me, and I've really enjoyed it. What's the chess one, The Queen's Gambit?
Oh yeah.
I thought that was great. There is, what is it show? I don't even know if it's still on there. On Netflix, if you can find a show called The Bletchley Circle.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That I think is astounding.
Okay.
Just story-wise.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for letting us interview.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you.
Now
I can see you because I can look over here.
Oh, you couldn't see me the whole time?
No, I was like, I was just trying to. I could see you moving in the corner of my eye, but the screen is going for some reason. So.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, you did great. I was watching you the whole time. I thought you were acting brilliantly.
Thank you. If ever they need someone to pretend that they can see someone. Well, again, thank you so much for doing this for us.
Oh no, that was simple, man. Those are easy questions. So I could have gone on for another 6 hours. So right on.
Amazing. All right. Have a good one.
You too, man.